Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We will get you top stories from India and the region. I'm Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in London, Julia Chapman.
Thanks, Tanvi. Coming up, food security concerns grow in North Korea after a devastating typhoon. A rare meeting of Japan and South Korea's leaders, and potential progress in the Hollywood writers' strike. But first, the headlines.
In his address at the G20 Health Ministers meet in Indian state of Gujarat, PM Modi says global health systems should be resilient.
We must be ready to prevent, prepare, and respond to the next health emergency.
Meanwhile, the G20 Health Ministers are discussing ways to strengthen cooperation in the pharmaceutical sector and digital health innovations. US President Joe Biden set to tighten South Korean and Japanese bond at Camp David. Fukushima water release on the agenda. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi virtually addressed the G20 Health Ministers meeting, which is being held in the western state of Gujarat a little while ago. PM Modi stated that COVID-19 pandemic gave a reminder to us all that health should be the center of all decision-making. Moreover, he stressed that COVID-19 pandemic has shown the value of international cooperation.
The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that health should be at the center of our decisions. It also showed us the value of international cooperation.
Further, Indian Prime Minister underlined that the world must be ready to prevent, prepare and respond to the next health emergency. In his address, PM Modi also reminded people that any health issue in one part of the world can affect the people around the globe in just a short span of time, just like COVID-19 did.
We must be ready to prevent, prepare and respond to the next health emergency. This is especially important in today's interconnected world. As we saw during the pandemic, health issues in one part of the world can affect all other parts of the world in a very short time.
Highlighting the Government of India's initiative, PM Modi said that the nation follows a holistic and inclusive approach. The approach includes traditional healthcare systems as well, not only for Indians, but also for the world, for better and affordable healthcare systems and infrastructure.
In India, we are following a holistic and inclusive approach. We are expanding health infrastructure, promoting traditional system of medicine and providing affordable health care to all.
19 member countries are participating in this meeting, which focuses on 3 priority areas. These are health emergencies, prevention, preparedness, and further cooperation in the fields of pharmaceuticals and digital health.
India prioritized health emergency prevention, preparedness, and response, placing emphasis on the One Health approach, recognizing that the well-being of our communities depends on the harmonious balance in the ecosystem.
Continuing with updates on India's G20 presidency, India held a bilateral meeting with Japan today, wherein it was unanimously agreed that the G20 has a crucial role to play in strengthening cooperation on important issues of global health security. Indian Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia also held a bilateral meeting with the US Health Secretary. A joint finance health ministers meeting is going to take place on Saturday. Under India's G20 presidency, the global initiative on digital health will also be launched. This initiative aims to transform the global digital healthcare landscape. Next, updates on India's moon mission Chandrayaan-3. Taking another step closer to the moon, India's Chandrayaan-3 lander module underwent a successful deboosting operation a little while ago. The Indian Space Research Organisation on Friday informed that the maneuver reduced its orbit to 113 kilometers into 157 kilometers, adding that the lander module's health is normal. The second deboosting operation is scheduled for August 20th, 2023.
Yeah.
Reports say North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made visits to typhoon-hit farmlands and oversaw the spraying of pesticides in the aftermath of one of the worst storms that hit the region in North Korea last week. Julia Chapman is in London and gives us more on this and other stories making it to the headlines. Julia, over to you.
The devastation that Typhoon Hanoon has brought to North Korea is adding to concerns about food security in the reclusive country. DD India's Patrick Falk reports.
Well, as we know, Hanoon was an incredibly powerful typhoon that swept across East Asia and did a lot of damage to South Korea. We can only imagine the level of destruction it brought to North Korea, where infrastructure is considerably weaker. We do know from state media reports that around 200 hectares of farmland in Onbyeon County were flooded as a result of the typhoon, and there are concerns about food security in North Korea, and there may very well also be concerns about political stability as a result of that. It was only a few days ago that state media reported Kim Jong-un as lashing out at officials for failing to manage the typhoon properly, and now it's projecting this idea that their leader is doing everything he can to prevent the situation from getting worse, and saying that not even an inch of farmland can be sacrificed. So again, it paints this picture of a very bad situation in the country, and North Korea is no stranger to famine. It suffered severe famine in the 1990s, and this situation now is also being exacerbated.
US President Joe Biden will be hosting the leaders of Japan and South Korea at a rural retreat just north of Washington, D.C. on Friday. The Asian nations were barely speaking 2 years ago. Now Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and President Yoon Suk-yeol will become the first foreign leaders to visit Camp David since 2015. DD India's Benji Heyer is in Washington, D.C. and sent us this report ahead of the meeting.
History repeats itself. This was South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol at the White House in April.
Prime Minister, it's great to see you again.
Just months earlier, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in the Oval Office. President Joe Biden also visited both countries back-to-back last year. More recently, all three men stood side by side at the G7 summit in Japan, and then at a NATO gathering in Lithuania. On Friday, they're back together on American soil, and there's lots to discuss, not least China.
South China Sea has been an area of concern where the Chinese have been building up these artificial islands, militarizing these artificial islands. So I think they'll make a statement about, reinforcing, the freedom of navigation.
Also on the agenda, North Korea, the nuclear testing totalitarian state.
We could see more commitments for trilateral exercises, for example. Information sharing is always important. Locking this in so that we don't have to worry about future political considerations, making sure that these commitments are long-standing.
there are issues that still need to be ironed out. Some of the policies that the Biden administration has pursued at home, investments, for example, in clean energy, have a protectionist bent.
There's still concerns about whether Korean and Japanese companies are going to have the same opportunities in the U.S. market that American companies do.
But this is a chance to present a united front in an ever-shifting geopolitical climate. Benji Haya in Washington reporting for DD India.
Army chiefs of the West African bloc ECOWAS say they are ready to intervene and restore peace in Niger. ECOWAS has activated a standby force following last month's coup.
A sternly worded message from the army chiefs in West Africa. They have criticized and accused the junta of not wanting to engage politically and diplomatically.
They are pretending, that, now they are ready for talks. But even as they are telling us that they are ready for talks, they are still seeking reasons to justify an unjustifiable coup d'etat.
The army chiefs have also emphasized their commitment to reinstating constitutional order. They maintain that if peaceful efforts fail, they are prepared to intervene.
Let no one be in doubt that if everything else fails, the valiant forces of West Africa, both the military and the civilian components, are ready to answer to the call of duty.
Meanwhile, in a tragic turn of events, at least 36 Nigerian soldiers have lost their lives in two separate attacks. The battles occurred when they fought off armed gangs in the northern central state of the country. Bureau Report, DD India.
The Writers Guild of America says it is evaluating a counter-proposal from television and film studios that could see progress in the labour stoppage that has now stretched on for more than 100 days. But big questions remain, such as how to make enough money from streaming to go around. Ira Spitzer reports from New York.
It's been a summer of discontent for film and television writers and actors in the U.S. For months, they've been out on the streets, rain or shine, in Hollywood and here in New York, bringing productions to a standstill.
The studios have really gone overboard with their insults and how they've been treating every single one of us, from the actor in front, from the writers.
The Writers Guild of America calls it an existential crisis. As streaming services have brought massive industry changes, writers and actors say their pay structure hasn't changed with the times. A big sticking point: residuals. The payments issued, for example, when an old movie airs on cable TV that don't pay as much from streaming.
But despite streaming recently overtaking cable television for audience size in the U.S., studios haven't really been able to turn a profit with it so far. Disney recently announced another $500 million of losses from streaming in the second quarter, and the entertainment giant has lost more than $11 billion on streaming since 2019, when it launched its Disney Plus service.
In spite of the recent success of the films Barbie and Oppenheimer, box office sales are still struggling to recover in the wake of the pandemic and the rise of streaming.
You have this really odd situation where every side has a problem. The studios have been losing a fortune trying to compete in streaming with Netflix. And there are fewer shows being made, and because theatrical exhibition has not rebounded anywhere close to what it was before, there's not enough money to go around or eyeballs to go around for either side to get what they need.
One thing the strike could do is increase the market for global productions, for example on Netflix, which has found big success with some international programming like the South Korean show Squid Game. But the issue of how to get consumers to pay for content, and the content creators, wherever they are, remains. As the strike drags on, things aren't likely to get much easier for anyone.
When they shoot a season in advance. So there's a lot of stuff in the can that they can show now and get away with it. So we might be stuck for another half year, another season anyway. It's really frightening. It's horrible.
Recent meetings between the studios and the unions could be a sign of progress. But for now, this bitter labor dispute marches on. Ira Spitzer reporting in New York for DD India.
That's it from me here in London. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Julia Chapman. You're with us on DD India Global, still to come on the program. American singer Britney Spears and her husband Sam Asghari decide to separate. Asghari says in divorce filing their split came weeks ago. Indian chess wonderkid R. Pragnananda heads to a semi-final clash in the FIDE World Cup.
Kerala encapsulates the emotion of India with its vibrancy and diversity.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Continuing with updates on India's G20 presidency, a 4-day youth summit is underway in the Indian spiritual city of Varanasi on Friday. The summit serves as a platform for negotiating and signing the Y20 communique, which aims to amplify young voices and influence high-level policy decisions. India's Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports, Anurag Singh Thakur, said that the summit is instrumental in molding the global economic narrative, especially for young people.
By 2030, the youth will dominate the global demographic with a considerable portion hailing from South Asia. With them lies the collective responsibility to influence global narratives and collaborative efforts. As we set our sights on future with an ever-changing landscape and the ever-evolving aspirations of the youth, it becomes crucial for the youth to adopt a flexible and forward-looking stance.
So we know that the G20 summit is scheduled for September 9th and 10th in New Delhi this year. DD India, the international English news channel of Doordarshan, is also getting ready for this next month's G20 summit. DD India correspondent Vishal Barrister spoke exclusively to Indian Information and Broadcasting Secretary Apurva Chandra, who says there's a lot of expectation for the new international channel of Doordarshan.
The countdown for G20 has begun, and as public broadcaster, Doordarshan has a very important role and responsibility to play. I have with me Secretary INB. Let's talk to him and find out. Sir, With G20 coming up, how do you see the role of Doordarshan? How do you see the role of
Doordarshan, of course, has a very, very important role to play. Doordarshan, of course, has a very, very important role to play. Because when all they come here and they converge for the G20 come here and they converge, then Doordarshan will be the one which will be providing all the entire world. All the entire world, Doordarshan team would be the Doordarshan team Bharat Mandapam station, and then Doordarshan is also, and then Doordarshan is also special to studios, preparing special media center studios in the media center. There will be certain areas which will be available only to Doordarshan. For example, the opening speech of the Prime Minister, the opening ceremony, and then the closing ceremony, then the bilaterals which will be of our own Prime Minister. They will be available only to Doordarshan, and Doordarshan would be making those feeds available to the entire world. In fact, the entire world would be watching what Doordarshan is doing.
Yeah, absolutely, Doordarshan News has got to play a very, very important role. But at the same time, DD India, which is our international English channel, has also a major role to play. So how are the preparations and what do you have to say on that?
DD India has made very major changes in the past 2 months or so in preparation for G20. The entire look has been changed. Several new programs have come up. And I'm sure that DD India would be watched not only in India but in other parts of the world, and DD will make a good name for itself. The way the changes are happening in DD, it bodes very well for the future of Doordarshan.
So there you heard the Secretary INB, he says that Doordarshan News and DD India, which is our international English channel, will live up to the expectation, and Doordarshan has always performed to its best. With cameraman Pramod Negi and Kamlesh in Delhi, this is Vishal Baristo for DD India.
The two-day summit on G20 Digital Innovation Alliance concludes on Friday in India's southern city of Bengaluru. The summit is focused on discussing digital public infrastructure, security in the digital economy and digital skilling. In more news from India, the Himalayan hill state of Himachal Pradesh is struggling following landslides triggered by days of rain. Disaster response force teams are continuing search and rescue operations for the 5th consecutive day. According to the officials, over 70 people have died. Authorities have managed to search 80% of the area with the help of machines. However, other parts now need to be searched by teams on the ground as machines are unable to reach some inaccessible areas. Meanwhile, excessive water released from dams has triggered flooding in India's northern state of Punjab. Multiple villages have been submerged in flood waters. Rescue teams along with army personnel have helped hundreds of people so far and sent more than 5,500 people to relief camps. The state's Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann also toured the flood-hit areas and inspected the devastation in the surrounding villages. Next, we take a look at some stories making news around the world. Singer Britney Spears and husband Sam Asghari have decided to end their marriage after being together for 14 months. Asghari has filed for divorce from the singer, citing irreconcilable differences. The 29-year-old Asghari and 41-year-old Spears got married last year after she was released from a legal conservatorship. Asghari is also seeking spousal support and payment of legal fees from Britney Spears. Amidst growing security concerns over possible Chinese government influence, New York City has now banned TikTok on government devices, calling the short video sharing app a cybersecurity threat. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has cautioned about the possible impact of the app on New Yorkers' data. New York City agencies have been asked to remove TikTok within 30 days, joining a number of US cities that have already restricted the app. Ukraine on Friday conducted nuclear disaster response drills in Mykolaiv region to prepare for any accident caused by Russian aggression. The drill was held at Pivdenoroshkin nuclear power plant, with dozens of civilians joining the emergency workers. And next, we take a look at all the sporting action in DD India Global. In cricket, India's T20 team take on Ireland later on Friday in the first of a three-game series. They will be seeking to respond strongly after a surprise series loss against the West Indies. Let's take a look at how both the sides are preparing ahead of the clash.
After suffering defeat in the T20I series against West Indies, India will take on Ireland in a three-match T20I series starting from today. The series will mark the return of Jasprit Bumrah and Prasidh Krishna after long injury layoffs. Bumrah is also handed over the captaincy of a relatively younger side. With the ICC ODI World Cup 2023 knocking on the doors, the progress of these two players along with the entire squad will be monitored. Apart from Bumrah and Krishna, uncapped players including the likes of Rinku Singh, Shivam Dube and Jitesh Sharma also got their national call with this series. For Ireland, Paul Sterling will be captaining the squad. Neil Rock and pacer Graham Hume have been replaced on the team by all-rounders Fionn Hand and Gareth Delaney. The bowling attack could be led by Benjamin White and Joshua Little. Harry Tector will also be under the spotlight as his form has been amazing throughout, given the fact he's featuring in several short format leagues across the globe. Ireland is playing with an unchanged squad against Team India. If we look at the past 5 clashes between India and Ireland, the men in blue have dominated the Irish squad. The head-to-head record between both squads stands 5-0 in favour of the Indian men. The Malahide Dublin pitch usually favours batting, giving an upper hand to the team chasing. Out of the 16 T20 international matches held at this venue, 7 were won by the team that batted first, whereas 9 were won by the chasing team. As there are many new faces on the Indian side, Ireland is pretty strong with an experienced yet stable selection. This will also ensure that Bumrah is on his toes as the match will surely go down to the wire. Sports Desk, DD India.
In yet another big transfer to the Saudi Pro League, Al Hilal have signed Morocco goalkeeper Yassine Bounau from Sevilla on a 3-year contract. 32-year-old Bounau was Sevilla's first-choice goalkeeper who helped the Spanish team to win 2 Europa League titles. He also helped Morocco reach last year's World Cup semi-finals in Qatar. An Indian grandmaster, wonder kid as they say to him in India, R. Pragnananda has become the first Indian after Vishwanathan Anand to enter the FIDE Chess World Cup semi-finals. R. Pragnananda beat fellow Indian grandmaster Arjun Ergyasi by 5-4 after tie-breaker. Pragnananda will face Fabiano Caruana in the final 4. And human-like robots are stealing the show at the World Robot Conference in China's capital, Beijing. The humanoid robots are winning praise for their natural movements, expressions and gestures. An engineer at XR Robots said that the upgrade has enabled the humanoids to move more naturally and have more subtle micro-expressions. They look real, ain't they? That's all in this edition of DD India Global. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day and, of course, the new look of our channel. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, X that is, Instagram and YouTube at DD India Live. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.